Welcome to Pyanodon's Hard Mode, the only mod so difficult it needs a disclaimer. Hard Mode takes all the fun of regular Pyanodons and cranks the difficulty up even further, adding heat mechanics and removing ways to void byproducts, forcing you to find a use for everything your factory produces. The game begins as it always does, with the engineer crash landing on the planet Nauvis. I lay down my first coal snake and start setting up my initial iron mine. As a side note, I am using a quick start mod with construction bots and a power armor to keep the grind factor down, but don't worry, there's still plenty of difficulty to come. Next up is copper, and already we're seeing some of hard mode's shenanigans. Copper now requires water as a mining fluid, and burner miners don't have flow-through. I managed to come up with this lovely little setup for getting the water routed. I don't love it. That is copper. That was not so bad. The next few steps are fairly standard for Factorio, setting up power and all the requirements for the automation science pack. Pyanodons, of course, means there are a lot more steps involved in that science pack and a lot more resources to gather. I need native flora, small parts, and planter boxes. Small parts are made from iron and copper, though there are several intermediates along the way. Native flora is gathered from special bioreserve resource patches. Planter boxes require wood and bricks to craft, then soil to fill and ash to fertilize. I finally managed to handcraft everything needed to gather the science prerequisites, laying down a flora collector, a soil extractor, and a few furnaces to start making stone bricks. I drop down the labs and start researching automation. Once the automation tech is done, I build my first little factory crafting small parts so I don't have to. Seriously, small parts are in everything, and all the intermediates mean they take a while to handcraft. Okay. And then we can get all of the base components for small parts going, which is a lot, and this is why the handcrafting for this is so awful and why I want these automated right away. Once I've got the parts to make belts, I make my first real coal line and hook it up to the power plant. Oh no! Oh well. One little zigzag in the belt. After a bit of experimentation, I finally figure out a good layout for automating my copper patch. All of those underground pipes are a little resource intensive this early in the game, but the other designs I could come up with used underground belts, which are even worse. Early Pyanodon's smelting stacks are also a little more complex than in the base game. Besides the weird ratios, you also have to deal with the ash from your furnaces, and that leads to this delightful little setup using filtered inserters. Couple spots here for ash output, and that is a smelting column. Once the copper is sorted, getting iron fully automated is easy. The smelting stack is identical, and iron doesn't require a mining fluid. We now have, an hour, 20 minutes in. We have an iron stack and a copper stack. With iron and copper automated, I can move my small parts factory over to where the smelted iron and copper lines come out, then add machines to automatically craft belts and inserters, the beginning of my mall, and the first taste of a properly automated factory. Now that the fundamental base components are building themselves, it's time to turn my attention towards automating science a bit further. Up until now, I've been relying only on stone gathered from surface rocks, but if I want to automate stone brick and eventually the automation science itself, I'll need to set up stone mining. In Pyanodon's hard mode, that means I need something called carbolic oil as a mining fluid. Carbolic oil is made when raw coal is processed into coke, and coke is used for steel production, so this is a good next step regardless. The plan sounds simple. Automate coke production and route the carbolic oil to the stone patch. There are a couple more byproducts to deal with, notably coal gas, which we have no use for, but can at least burn into ash so it doesn't back up. But when all is said and done, I end up with a fairly nice setup for making coke and producing carbolic oil for early stone mining. And that is our carbolic oil. And with that, we will finally be able to mine stone. Aside from the carbolic input, stone mining is basically the same as base Pyanodons. That means the stone patches give both stone and kerogen. Kerogen is a petroleum source that I can't quite process yet, but it can still be our fuel for the stone miners and the furnaces used to make the stone bricks. Now that I have a fancy new brick factory, I can start towards getting research running properly. I need to route over all the same ingredients that were needed when I crafted the first science by hand. Bricks, soil, and flora. This means dragging a couple of hilariously long belts, but is otherwise pretty straightforward. Before long, science is running smoothly. All right. That is, I think, science. The next big priority is going to be steel, which I thought would be easy. Alas, hard mode had another trick up its sleeve for me on this one. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no! Melon, why? There's no other way to generate heat this early? Power plants. Or burner. Melon. Thanks, I hate it. Alright, well, all this is wrong. That's right, advanced foundries now require heat, and burner heaters can only be fueled with biological sources. At this stage in the game, the only real option for biological fuel is native flora, or its spoiled form called fluorospalanin. The spalanin has a much better fuel value than the flora, so I ideally want to spoil flora in chests before using it as fuel. To be honest, I never got this to work quite right, and I swapped steel over to a more reliable fuel source as soon as I was able. The first thing to do with steel is to create jaw crusher machines. Processed iron ore is 60% more efficient than smelting iron ore directly into plates, so it's a worthwhile upgrade early on. The crushed ore also produces a stone byproduct, which for now I throw in a box. Future Brannon will eventually drag out a belt to turn that stone byproduct into bricks alongside the mined stone. Hey, there we go, 6 hours in, processed iron. And this is exactly backwards from what it needed to be. I am a genius. Unfortunately, the jaw crushers take quite a bit of power, and my grid just can't handle it. These are not all running. Why not? That probably means, yup. Oh dear. I double my power plant and route in another belt of coal. This gets me thinking about how much ash the power plant has been generating, and it's starting to become a problem. New goal, process ash into something useful. Ash processing in Pyanodons is a two-step process. First, ash is broken down into soot, coal dust, and iron oxide. Then the soot can be processed for a chance at several different ores. Iron and copper can both appear, but also several metals will soon need: lead, zinc, and aluminum. Without splitters, the large number of outputs from the soot processing are a bit unwieldy, but it can all be managed with filtered inserters. Oh, did I mention that in Pyanodons you don't get splitters until after circuits? We won't be seeing them in this video. At this point, the only ingredient needed for fully automated science is wood. Wood needs botanical nurseries, and botanical nurseries need glass, so the next thing I'm building is a glass factory. Molten glass is created from quartz in a glassworks, and that molten glass can then be cast into solid glass for use in other recipes. The glassworks requires a liquid fuel. Initially, this fuel will be shale oil, finally providing me a use for kerogen. I also send down the coal gas as a fuel, rather than wasting it by burning it to ash. With Factorio 2's new fluid mechanics, a single pipe can carry all the different fluids I want to use as fuel for my glass. So this should just work? Question mark? This will come in handy later on when there are even more weird flammable liquids that I need to get rid of. Glass in hand, the other thing I need for wood production is moss. Moss is relatively simple, being grown in a moss farm building with carbon dioxide and muddy sludge. Muddy sludge is just soil and water, and CO2 can be produced from coke in a high-pressure furnace. The only really interesting thing here is something that happens a lot with Pyanodon's alien life. Moss itself is also a module, and the moss farms need moss modules in order to produce more moss. This is all bootstrapped with moss that I got from breaking down boulders. I'm liking it. Right around here, I get distracted with improving my coal and tar processing setup. This isn't really necessary for the wood goal, but it's a big milestone anyway. Tar processing in Pyanodons is one of the early complex processes you need to work through on the way to circuits. More important for the short term, though, is that the upgraded processing can produce most of the steam needed for tar cracking with its own coke. This means I have more raw coal available to send over to my power plant as the base keeps growing. Just as before, we convert raw coal to coal and then coal to coke. This still produces coal gas and tar. The tar, rather than being turned directly into carbolic oil, now goes through several additional cracking and processing steps. This nets me more coke, more carbolic oil, and more coal gas, as well as several new products: creosote, gasoline, hydrogen, and aromatics. These will all have their own uses eventually, but for now they're all flammable, and they all get sent as fuels down to the glassworks. This is the true abomination of this whole project, is the fuel pipe. Which one is it? This one. With the tar distraction wrapped up, I return to wood. Just as we needed moss modules for the moss farms, our tree farms need tree modules. Trees can be grown in a botanical nursery from seedlings, and seedlings are grown from moss and tree seeds in another nursery. The tree farms themselves will need seedlings, water, and ash to produce logs. It's at this point that I make a horrible discovery. Oh no. Seedlings spoil. Oh, okay. Okay, this is fine. This is fine. What do they spoil into? Seedlings spoil back to seeds. I try to deal with this by looping the spoiled seedlings back as another input of seeds. This is actually completely broken and will cause my whole wood to jam up, but I won't realize that for a few more hours. Finally, late at night on day 114, I produce my first automated log. With this, the first science pack is fully automated. This is only the beginning. The next hurdle is green circuits, and then on to more advanced science packs. Things are only going to get worse from here.